Welcome you back to the Patrick Netherton Show right here on 1130 The Tiger. He's Rogers. I'm Patrick. Pleased to have you with us, and we're always thrilled to welcome in the GOAT among all college basketball cognoscenti. He is the great Mike DeCourcy of Sporting News. Mike, how are you, man?
I am well, Patrick. Rogers, how are you?
Well, look at that.
I'm good, buddy. What's going on, my old friend?
Yes, I miss you guys, man.
You too, Mike. We love you, brother.
Absolutely.
Oh, now that we got all the butt kissing out of the way. I love you too, Rogers. Hey, Mike, this has just been such a strange year, and having basically had to work through it. I have. Just before we go sort of into what we've got going on right now and how college basketball is shaping up right now, just walk me through what this has been like as a guy who's covering this sport. You've covered this sport for decades. What's this year been like for you?
It has changed my situation immeasurably. Obviously, I have not been to a game. Their value for me in going to a game is reduced if I can't sit where I ordinarily would sit, and if I can't chat with all the people that I love to chat with, to talk hoops, to get the idea of what really happened in a game and all of that sort of thing. And you can't do any of that. And so I have not been to any games. That's a factor. I've continued to work for Big Ten Network, but I have been doing it remotely from home. And I just so desperately miss seeing Dave Revson, seeing Mike Hall and Rick Pizzo, seeing Stephen Bardo and the producers up there, Mark Carmen and Bill Koplis and the whole team. I mean, they're just wonderful people, and I don't get to interact with them like I did in the past. I wrote an article right on the eve of this season that talked about March 7th, 2020. And that day was basically the last day before everything changed. There were, Monday and Tuesday of conference tournament week still happened, and there were some cool games. Northern Kentucky won in the Horizon League and all that sort of stuff. But that was the last day when, everything was flying. And it was maybe as good a day of college basketball, regular season-wise, as we have had in the last 20 years. There were buzzer beaters everywhere. There were tournament bids, and it was just phenomenal. And I remember not even, giving a thought to the idea that there wouldn't be a tournament. Mm-hmm. And 4 days later, it was all gone.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to look back on that day. And we were all in the green room, and Kentucky won at the buzzer, and UCLA lost on a USC jump shot at the buzzer, and it was just and we had great games on our air with Wisconsin beating Indiana late and coming back and winning the Big Ten, and it was just a phenomenal day. And I cannot wait to have another day like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. We were in Katy for the Southland tournament. The Demons had won their first round matchup on Wednesday night, and then I go back to the hotel room, and I'm kind of procrastinating doing my boards because we were hearing this was when Rudy Gobert was just right. Being announced he tested positive, and I think that had happened the night before. And then we come back on that Wednesday, and we get done. Demons had won Wednesday night. That Thursday morning, and all I'm thinking is, things are about to happen. And as soon as the NBA announced they were suspending, I was like, well, we're done. You can't ask the professionals to not play and then ask the amateurs to play. I described the atmosphere in the green room at BTN that day and how much fun we had. And then I went back 4 days later, because the Big Ten tournament was going to be played in Indianapolis, and the studio usually is set up in a corner of whatever building we're in, mm-hmm. and there's a desk, and that was withdrawn, and they were going to have the studio in Chicago now. So I went up Wednesday for the first two games. It was the second of the two was Indiana versus Nebraska.
and the atmosphere. Not anything that anybody there had done, but that like you knew that now things were bad outside, and the atmosphere just felt so much different, so much more somber. That glorious Saturday to that somber Wednesday, and I am happy that we have gone to this point where, it's still bad out there, and you got to be careful, and you got to be smart, and wear your mask, and all of that. And I am totally all in on that. I take the pandemic very seriously, but I think that what we're seeing now from the athletes, their ability to power through this, their desire to power through this. Every now and then I'll see this cynical Twitter take. Well, they're just doing it so that they can get the TV money. Okay, so then explain to me why Division II is playing.
Yeah.
Where's the TV? There's all kinds of TV money in Division II we don't know about? It's just sort of sliding under the carpet and nobody knows. No, they're playing because they're athletes. They're players, and they want to be out there. My school, Point Park University in Pittsburgh, NAIA, they just made the semifinals of their conference tournament last night. There's no money in that.
Yeah.
Come on, they are athletes. They only have this limited time to do this, and so they're doing it. And I, as someone who loves to cover it, appreciate the sacrifices that athletes are making, coaches are making, officials are making. It's an impressive thing to see all of them doing it, and I don't appreciate the cynicism that says that it's only about the TV money and it's only about getting the NCAA tournament played and all that kind of stuff. Hey, that stuff's all important. I mean, no question. It's important to the schools. It's important to the coaches and it's important to the leagues. But when there was going to be no football season in the Big Ten in the autumn, when they said this is not the right time to play football, the conference decided that in August of 2020. The players sued in some of the schools to get back on the field.
Yeah.
That's how badly they want it. And I did a story with a couple of young men from Ohio State and some others where they were on the plane to go back to Ohio State as the next flight. As soon as they said we're playing, they were like, okay, get me a flight back to Columbus. I'm playing. They were thinking that they were going to be in the draft and not play, and no, I'm back because I'm playing because this matters to me. And they ended up playing the national championship game.
I will say this: my opinion did change a lot once I got around the teams a little bit. NSU had one of the most daunting non-conference schedules there was, including a Tulsa to Missouri State to Gonzaga on consecutive nights, Washington State the next night trip that they had. And I was able to test at their level, at the Tier 1 level, and therefore be able to travel with the team. And what I saw is that, these kids are passionate about it. They want to play. They're not doing this at the point of a bayonet. They're doing this because they love it and they want to do it. And they're submitting to testing, and they're wearing masks, and they're following protocols. I mean, they're doing it because they love the sport. And to be honest with you, it changed my mind a little bit. I'm like you. I'm a absolute mask, social distance. Take the vaccine when you can get it. All of that. Let's do all of those things. But it changed my mind a little bit when I got around those kids, were able to spend some time around them like I'm used to during a normal season, on the bus, all of those kind of things. I got to actually see the passion that they have for it.
Yeah, I did a piece back in December, I guess it was, after the season had gotten percolating a little bit, and you started to see games played in empty venues, and I noticed particular benches trying to fill that void, trying to bring the energy to their team. So I talked to walk-ons from Arizona, Marquette, Syracuse. Well, Syracuse was actually a scholarship player whose minutes were low. I talked to maybe 4 or 5 at different schools, and they aren't. These guys weren't even playing. I mean, and I joked because I said, you don't even have the student section to yell at the coach to put you in when your team's up 25. They have to think of it on their own.
Yeah.
But I said, why are you doing it? Because this is where we want to be. This is what we want to do, even though we are not on the floor much. Practice, we get to practice the same as usual, but we don't get in games that much, but we are where we want to be. And I have so much respect for that. And it really reinforces why I love what I do and why, I love the games that I cover and why it matters to me.
Talking to Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News, the man that I refer to as the GOAT among the college basketball writers. All right, Mike, let's talk about this season. And obviously it feels like it's kind of a two-horse race, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes Michigan, here comes Ohio State. Some other teams are kind of creeping in there, but do we truly have a two-horse race with Gonzaga and Baylor right now, or do we think that a Michigan or maybe one of these other teams that has proven themselves over the last couple of weeks could slip in there and actually win this thing?
Well, what you have to remember about the nature of the college basketball tournament is that even if we do have two teams that stand above everybody else, doesn't mean the third team or the fifth team or the eighth team can't win it, because that's how college basketball, the single elimination tournament, sometimes changes the chemistry of its championship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how often have we had the definitive best team win in college basketball? 2018 with Villanova, yes, but certainly not in the 2017. They weren't necessarily the definitive best team. They were among the best teams. 2016, when Villanova won, they were a 2 seed. So it just sort of shows you that even though I do think those two teams are on a plane slightly above Michigan, and then there's a bit of a drop off to the next team down from there, I'm not guaranteeing they're going to win it. One of those two. I just think they have the very best shot. And I've been asked if I could take those two or the field, what would I do? And at one point I said I'd take the field because numerically it's what makes sense.
Sure.
And then I changed when I started to see how Gonzaga and Baylor were playing.
Mm-hmm.
I changed my mind. And now that I see Michigan sort of creeping up, so now I get the third best team and the field, and the third best team isn't that far behind 1 and 2. Now I'm starting to wonder if the best bet isn't to go back to the field. So I'm not much of a flip-flopper, but on that subject I have been.
One of the things that concerns me about Gonzaga, and obviously I got to watch them up close and personal 2 nights in a row. By the way, find the last time a team played the number one squad on back-to-back nights. I'd be curious to know when that last happened. I got to see them up close and personal. The thing that concerns me about Gonzaga is, they play all these really good non-conference games. They scheduled really well. Even during the pandemic, they were able to play a lot of good non-con games. But then they get into conference play, and especially this year, there's just really nobody in their league that stands up to them. They're kind of walking over everyone. Is there a concern that they haven't been in a close game in so long that by the time they get to the tournament and they get into a close game, maybe they're not at their best, another team is on fire, they don't have that well to draw back on like a Baylor does, where they're in close games seemingly all the time in the Big 12?
Well, I would say that the answer to your first question is yes. I'm just not sure I would drag Baylor to that because Baylor hasn't been in that many close games.
Right.
They have somewhat the same problem. I think their lowest victory might have been by 8. I'm not even nearly all their.
The Iowa State game this past week was.
So now finally, because they came off pandemic, you're right. Now they have that experience. Okay, we have to be able to keep our wits about us. We're way down. So that, even though it meant, having to be on pause for 5 games, and even though they did it against one of the worst teams on their schedule, it probably helped them to have that experience. I was thinking of pre-pause Baylor, which I don't know that he even had played a single-digit game.
Yeah,
but you're right. That's a real problem. That was Vegas 91.
Yeah,
it wasn't the biggest problem for Vegas 91 was they got into a neighborhood they didn't know any of the streets. The neighborhood was really close game against really good teams. And all of a sudden they're like, there's no GPS. We didn't have it then. And they didn't know how to find their way around it. And they were unsettled by it. And Duke had played in lots of those games. They were a very good team, not yet a great one.
Right.
And so they knew how to play that game, and they had confidence in it. And Vegas, even though they were better and they knew they were better, they didn't know that territory, and that's what got them beat. And it happened to an extent with Kentucky as well in 2015. You know, they did play a close game in the regional final against Notre Dame, and they did navigate it well. But in the semis, they were in a close game against a great team. Notre Dame was a very, very, very good team. That Wisconsin team was legitimately great. And so they were not as familiar with playing that kind of game, and Wisconsin knew how to do it better, and that's why they got home.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Miracle on Ice, right? I mean, I was 4 years old when that happened, but when you watch the movie, they were talking about at the end that the coach had he didn't even know to pull his goalie. He had never been behind at that point and didn't know what to do.
Yes.
You know, I think that there's an interesting parallel there. Mike, before we let you go, I did want to ask you about the NCAA has come out and kind of laid out their guidelines for making sure there's as full a field as they can possibly get for the NCAA tournament. Basically, they're going to find a way to replace teams that have COVID issues going into the tournament, but once the tournament begins, the field is set and that's it. There's no more replacement teams. Seems like a pretty sound philosophy to me. I get curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I think they handle it very well. And the replacements will only happen up to Tuesday before the tournament.
Yeah.
So if there were some situation on Wednesday, Thursday morning before the games began, then at that point they would proceed with a no contest, and the standing team would advance. But I think they're handling that very well. What they're doing is if it's the Southland Conference, and well, I don't want to use that example. I don't want to jinx anybody. But if we're a league like the Southland Conference,
I mean, let's say Abilene. Look, Abilene Christian is the number one team in the league right now. They win the tournament, but then they have COVID issues. The NCAA is going to find a way to make sure the Southland is represented, whether it's the second team or who are they beat in the championship or whatever the parameters are. Someone from the Southland is still going to be in the tournament.
It will be up to the Southland to determine: do they want to place the second place team or the highest ranked team from the league standings? Do they want to take the team that lost the championship game? Do they want to use the net rankings and say whoever that highest team is, we'll send them? It's up to the league to designate that, and they have to designate that by the end of business tomorrow, how they are going to decide that alternative, and then that team would go in place. If it's a multi-bid league, then they don't have the compulsion to just pull if you, for instance, in the Big Ten,
right?
They might have 8 teams or 9 teams in. They're not going to say, okay, 10th team from Big Ten gets to go. Now, what they're going to do is say the first 4 teams that didn't make it, number 69, 70, 71, 72, you're lined up and you're waiting. And if somebody has an unfortunate situation, then that team will get the phone call, and if they're all in position to be able to go, then they will enter the bracket. And if it's a number 6 seed that has to leave the field because of COVID issues, that's where this team will go in. They will go in as a number 6 seed. And the reason for that is to not disrupt the competition, to not make the competition unfair. If they did, it's also because the bracket is important, and you can't redo the whole bracket. That's part of it. But also, if you took that number 6 and then you squeezed in this number 69 team into the first 4, then somebody gets promoted out of the first 4, and everybody has to move up a line, it really redoes the entire field.
Yeah.
And the coaches will have spent 48 hours almost nonstop preparing for the team that's on the bracket opposite them. And then all that would be thrown away because everybody got shifted.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. So even though you're the 69th team, so to speak, if you have to be a 6 seed, you're a 6 seed.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to go.
It kind of reminds me of Monday qualifiers for golf, right? Alternates. As okay, well, Dustin Johnson had to pull out with a back injury, so here comes Jim Smith, the first alternate, to jump in, and he's in that spot. last thing, and this is just probably me not doing enough research. I'm assuming since we're bubbling everything in the greater Indianapolis area for the entirety of the NCAA tournament, I'm assuming the NCAA is in charge of all of the testing protocols. Is that accurate?
Well, everybody to get there, everybody has to produce 7 consecutive days of negative tests in advance of Selection Sunday. Mm-hmm. And those are all done wherever they are, whether it's in Vegas or Indy here with the Big Ten or wherever, maybe some of the teams would be back on campus, wherever they might be, those are done there. And then once they are selected or have earned their way in, then they start traveling to Indy on Sunday and Monday, depending on when they finish. They'll be on their way here to Indy. And once you're here, then the NCAA is in control. I don't know exactly whether they've contracted out or whatever, but they're in control.
Well,
of the
what I'm getting at is what you don't want to see is a team that is going to make the tournament and suddenly they're fudging some records and oh, this guy's got a cough, but don't worry, that's tuberculosis. It's not COVID. That's what I'm talking about. I just don't want to see, because look, Mike, I'll tell you, here in Louisiana, high school football season, regular season teams are canceling, postponing games left and right due to COVID issues. They get in the playoffs and suddenly nobody has COVID anymore. And they're all playing for a championship. And what I'm getting at is I'm curious if the NCAA is going to be able to sort of clamp down on that and make sure that someone doesn't say, oh, we got a COVID positive, but let's hide this kid so we can make sure we're in the tournament.
Well, they will be tested upon arrival, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whether that's the day the minute they walk in the door or soon thereafter, but they will be tested on arrival. So if you try to fake your way through, and you're going to, then you would presumably get caught in those first 2 days before that Tuesday at 6 p.m. deadline to have the replacement team come in. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they can get away with that. I think they can probably say, you might be able to squeeze it a little bit by saying, okay, like our third walk-on, he got it, but he didn't see anybody.
Right.
We didn't have him near any guys.
He lives in a shed out back. He doesn't actually live with other players, so don't worry about that.
And then you maybe cross your fingers that you can get to Indy and everybody tests clean.
Yeah.
And you're cool. That might happen. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's wild, man. It really is.
I do think that once they get here, I'm pretty confident that once they get here and in the door and basically cleared for takeoff, I think if they can get all 68 teams into that place, I think they can get everybody home, either 67 with an L and 1 with a trophy. I really believe if they can get them through the door, they can do that.
I hope so too.
They're being very careful.
Have they told y'all what the media is going to be doing? Are y'all are you going to be able to be there? What's the testing protocol for y'all? Do you know any of that yet?
I don't think that we have any protocols relative to that because I'm pretty sure we're not going to allow to be having any contact with anybody.
Yeah.
So
in the arena, but away from everyone, kind of like they're doing now with most of the media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So unlike the NBA with the bubble where they had media who were clear through, that won't be us. And it's going to be a very limited number of X number of beat writers. I think it's 5 per team, a small contingent of national media. It's a small contingent of, I believe there'll be some accommodation for local media here in Indy, and that'll be it.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be very limited, and I'm looking forward to the idea of the tournament being here. I hope to see some of it in person, but I'm looking forward to it regardless of how I consume it because I remember what last March was like. I don't want that to happen again. I know it's not going to happen again, but I hope I never see that again in my lifetime.
I'm with you, brother. Absolutely. Hey, you gave us way too much time. Clearly, all the time spent kissing up to Rogers Hampton took all of our interview time. So As always, brother, thank you so much. You're the best. And, hey, keep your head down. As our boy John Rothstein would say, stay positive, test negative, and let's get to the
you
tournament.
too, man. And I really meant it when I said I miss seeing you guys all the time, and I really I appreciate your friendship, and I do miss getting the chance to interact with you in person more often.
Oh, no doubt, brother. Well, hey, maybe the Demons will make a nice run to Indy, and we'll get to see each other. You never know.
Hope so. I hope so.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
All right, Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News.